All right, you guys. So, 20 months ago, it was announced that Xbox was going to be moving to acquire Activision publishing all the Call of Duties, Tony Hawk's, Crash Bandicoots, all of that stuff. And it immediately divided, I think, a lot of gamers. Xbox fanboys were excited, PlayStation fanboys were crying this is the end of the world. Fast forward to October 13th, 2023, that is today, and the deal finally goes through. It's official. Xbox finally owns Activision Blizzard King Publishing and everything underneath that. A lot of people have thoughts. A lot of people have different takes. I see some people, weird Xbox fans, that are saying, all right, we bought Activision. Let's go out and buy the next company, which is like, okay, sure. See PlayStation fanboys acting like this is the end of the world. And I see a lot of people that just don't care. Me personally, I care, but I don't think I care in the same way some of these other people are talking about it care about. I think some people are talking about like how bad acquisitions could be for the gaming industry, how bad acquisitions could be for companies. I get that, and I 100% agree with that. I think big companies buying big companies is an issue in all industries. You know, you get into the oligopoly of everything, the monopolization of everything, and that's obviously never a good thing. With that being said, I think Activision has been very stagnant for a very long time. I think they're pretty much the Call of Duty publisher, and then every now and again do remakes of like Spyro, remakes of Tony Hawk, which are cool. But when you look at Activision's long lineage of amazing banger titles, things like Prototype, Gun, um, Tony Hawk, like tons of really awesome IPs that just don't really get any love whatsoever. I'd be surprised if like current day gamers who really got into gaming like PS4, PS5, etc. would even be familiar with things like a Spyro, a Tony Hawk. I think those are definitely a product of the early PlayStation 2, some PlayStation 3, but pretty much pre Call of Duty Activision. So I don't think, again, Activision has been utilizing their IPs properly for a very long time. Obviously, there was the whole like issues with Bobby Kotick and tons of other people working there. Um, so I don't think Activision was necessarily in a great place to begin with. Xbox purchasing Activision might be better off for Activision in the long run. And this is where I kind of want to show my concerns, things that I'm hoping end up happening. As far as Xbox buying this publishing company, again, Activision has been widely underutilizing their IPs in favor of Call of Duty, and I get it, right? The money is there. Hey, I'm a big Call of Duty fan. I freaking get it. With that being said, I don't think Call of Duty needs to be a yearly release. I think this is something a lot of people have been crying out for, that you shouldn't be just pumping out Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty every year. And I do think that Call of Duty is a brand strong enough that I don't think they necessarily need to release a new one every year. I think they can go like the Fortnite model. I think they can do that idea where they kind of just like make like a new smaller patches to like the Call of Duty platform, similar to Modern Warfare 3 to Modern Warfare 2, where if you look at it, a lot of it is essentially the same game. It's just new, different maps, different guns, some meta changes, etc. But nothing groundbreaking, and that's pretty much Call of Duty in a nutshell. It's never groundbreaking. It's never been innovative too much. I think they really perfected what like Call of Duty is back in Modern Warfare 2, and everything since has just been very iterative. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, I think that's actually a strong thing for hopefully what Xbox could do, partnering it with Game Pass. When you look at a lot of, games on Game Pass that get updated frequently, and you hear these stories of people saying, "Oh, now this game is playable." And, now Halo Infinite is good. Now Redfall is playable, etc. I think this idea of people having Game Pass, having the subscription, and kind of just checking back in on games that launched not great, But then, months down the road, years down the road, even people start like saying, "Hey, you know, come back and play these games because they're good now." I think they have that idea of people kind of just checking in whenever, because you do have that subscription service. And I think that lends itself really, really well to what Call of Duty can become, as far as like just kind of definitely dumbing down their like new games. I don't think they need to go too all out. I think you just work on the campaign, and I think you add some new maps, and then you do that every single year. And Call of Duty fans, I think, would be fine with that. Me personally, I would be fine with that. As far as how you choose to monetize that, I think it's going to be the biggest thing. People have already shown that they're willing to spend $70 for any new Call of Duty game, no matter how small the changes. For example, Modern Warfare 3 to Modern Warfare 2 isn't the next step in Call of Duty. It's very, very, very iterative on what Modern Warfare 2 was. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I can't say anything because, again, I bought Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. But, again, it's one of those things that how long can they push that? I think if they make smaller, like, price, like, what do I say? If they release the next, like, Call of Duty, like, waves or seasons or whatever every year at, like, a smaller price, I think they can get away with that successfully. I think they can charge people, $30 entrance fee to Call of Duty every year for, like, to get, like, the newest maps and newest updates, etc., or just subscribe to Game Pass. I feel like that'd be a pretty fair payoff where all Call of Duty fans are going to be paying less for Call of Duty in general, not just the Game Pass subscribers, etc. And I think that'd be a really, really smart move for Xbox to kind of pivot their image, their optics, because right now they're looked at as like, this big conglomerate that just buys IPs and has no soul and has no real IPs of their own. And it's pretty true, because Gears of War is nowhere, Halo isn't that great. We'll see what happens with Fable. Forza is kind of like the machine that just keeps on turning. Like, it's always going to be a good game coming out, but it's never going to be that amazing console seller game, because again, it's a racing game. That's a very niche within a niche. So I do think that with Activision being so like frowned upon, I think within the general gaming community, I think Xbox acquiring them could use that to their advantage, right? I think you bring back all these old games that people haven't really played or cared about in a long time. Things like Prototype, things like a Gun, things like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. Things that have smaller fan bases, but are like die-hard fan bases. I think you could bring them back in more modern ways. You can remake them, remaster them, upscale them, whatever. As well as creating new entries, creating new audiences. I think the problem with Xbox is that for the longest time, they were like the bro console. They were like the console for the bros, and you drink your Mountain Dew and your Red Bulls, and you play Halo and COD, and that's kind of what Xbox was for a really long time. And I feel like it's very obvious with like all their RPGs that are coming out, all of their Bethesda Studio games coming out that are very different from what we come to expect from Xbox. Things like a Starfield, things like an Avowed, things that, again, you don't really look at Xbox and be like, yeah, that makes sense. So I think them buying Activision gives them an access to tons of studios that can start working on projects that are different than, just Call of Duty. Different than things that they already have, right? Because I think with Bethesda, they kind of locked down that like RPG studios, right? They have games like Avowed, games like Starfield, and Elder Scrolls 6 coming out eventually. They have studios to build RPGs. They have their, quote unquote shooters, because now they have Call of Duty as well as Halo, so they're set on that. Now they can really deep dive into like action adventure games, more story focused games, more narrative deep dives. Platformers, because you have Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and Banjo. You can have like maybe like a Toys for Bob or something be like the platform studio. They make the 3D platformers. Boom, that's another audience that you can pull from. And I think this is what Xbox has been pushing for a really long time, about this whole like changing the narrative of what Xbox is. And I think until Xbox can do that, it's gonna be hard for them to grow Game Pass, grow their console sales, grow their recognition within the gaming space. But again, bringing it back to this whole Activision purchase, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing yet. It could be potentially a terrible thing for sure, but it could also potentially be an amazing thing for Activision and Xbox alike. Again, Activision wasn't in the best position prior to this acquisition. Xbox, them trying to be this whole like consumer friendly, we're your homies, we got your back type of company to the gamers, can definitely use this Activision acquisition to change the narrative on what we think of Xbox. If they come out with a game like a Prototype 3 or even a Prototype reboot, come out with things like another Tony Hawk game or the next Crash game, next Spyro game, IPs that are legendary within the gaming space but have been widely underutilized for a very long time. I think Xbox could be the home for all these type of titles. And if everything Phil Spencer is true, which honestly I do not believe it, but if he wants to be, truthful with the things that he's saying, where he's like, we allow Game Pass allows these developers to work on their passion projects, right? When you look at a Pentiment, when you look at a Hi-Fi Rush, these are these developers' passion projects. They're not the end all be all of games. They're not the biggest and baddest. They're just these passion projects. So if you really believe that Game Pass is the key to allowing these developers to create their passion projects, I better see some of these Activision studios coming off of Call of Duty and start working on something that they want, maybe some new IPs. This would be another thing that Xbox really has to start putting their foot down and saying, hey, we need IPs that are synonymous with the Xbox brand. Because right now, people look at Starfield and they say that's a Bethesda game. Redfall is an arcade, kind of a bad arcade game, but it's an arcade game, right? When Activision starts making games for them, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's Activision's Call of Duty. And this has been the issue that I've kind of been talking about for kind of a long time on this channel, is that Xbox just buying out these studios doesn't necessarily make these studios feel like Xbox studios or Xbox publishers or anything like that. They kind of just feel like they're their own thing still, and then Xbox writes the checks, which is, I don't think what Xbox should be doing. I think Xbox really needs to kind of like create a culture synonymous with their brand, with all of these new publishers, studios, developers underneath their umbrella. They all need to be working in some kind of like parity where their games are hitting at the same quality. Their games aren't necessarily the same style, but definitely have the same culture behind it. And I think right now that's like one of the things that's missing, where every game has its own like individuality, almost to the fault of not being synonymous with Xbox. They all feel kind of like third-party publishers that are making like individual games for the Xbox and PC, but they don't really feel like Xbox game studios, and I think that's the biggest thing that it doesn't concern me, but I feel like is the potential that Xbox is missing. I think Xbox needs to get their studios together, round them all up together, and say, this is our vision for Xbox. Every single developer within this is in the same goal of pushing this vision forward, whether that be creating the more consumer-friendly style games, whether that be innovating on technology, whether that be gameplay focused like a Nintendo or something like that. Whatever the case is, they need to have kind of like a mission statement, a culture, same kind of vision, goal for the brand. Yes, these variety of studios that you own that make variety of different games are going to have their own personalities and own individualities that 100% needs to stay and needs to remain. With all that being said, somewhere along the line they need to feel like Xbox Game Studios, or they're just, I don't know, I feel like because people don't connect the dots to Xbox, it doesn't benefit Xbox in the long run. And then I think that's where we're going to see my biggest worry, is that if them purchasing Activision, them purchasing Bethesda doesn't increase Game Pass subscribers, doesn't increase console sales or software sales or any metric that would make sense for Xbox, then I think that's where we're going to start seeing people getting terminated. That's where we're going to start seeing, studios getting shut down. When you look at a similar situation with like the Embracer Studios, where they bought all these studios to make games, And the second a lot of those games weren't making money, or second it wasn't producing the metrics they needed, they start closing, shutting people down, and giving people the axe. And I feel like that's a very similar story that could potentially happen within Xbox, is if they don't see, the numbers come back to them in a way that makes sense for spending $69 billion, then yeah, we're going to start seeing heads roll. We're going to start seeing companies fall off, companies that we love and like, or even just kind of like know, like an Activision, where we don't really love and like them, but we know them, we buy their games. So again, my biggest concern, worry about this is Xbox not seeing the return for the huge amount of money they spent. Because, with all that money being spent, expectations is through the roof. They're going to need to see that return on investment for them to justify keeping these, brands, keeping these IPs, keeping these people working and employed for Xbox. And Xbox right now being the third place console space, third place third place console within the gaming space, I don't see like how this 69 billion makes sense in the long run. And that's my biggest issue. Hopefully Xbox can figure it out. Hopefully Xbox can get all these studios to make sense for them, and then hopefully see a return on their investment. So again, we can continue seeing projects coming out from, whoever makes Spyro, whoever makes Crash, whoever makes Call of Duty. Because I mean, as much as we all poop on Call of Duty, I honestly can't imagine a gaming landscape without it. It's one of those pillars in gaming, and it's been a pillar in gaming for a really long time. Whether you play it, whether you know it, whether you like it or not, that is a huge pillar within this industry, is that Call of Duty. And if for some reason Xbox messes up this so hard that Call of Duty can't keep coming out, they're crazy, and they messed up hard. Ultimately, do I think anything is going to change within these companies? Probably not. I think we see that there's not a whole lot of change within Bethesda or any of these studios that are necessarily positive. I think generally most of these studios have probably been releasing their worst projects under Xbox. So again, with Xbox acquiring Activision, this is a huge way for them to kind of change that narrative, man. If they can come out and start releasing banger titles underneath the Activision brand, then we can all look at Xbox and say, okay, this was thanks to Xbox, right? Because right now Activision is just Call of Duty. But if they can release, again, a Crash, a Spyro, a Tony Hawk, or a Prototype, whatever, and those be bangers, then we can all point to Xbox and say that acquisition was a good one. Anyways, this video went way further than I ever expected it to take, so I'm just gonna have to end it here. Like the video if you guys like the video. Please consider subscribing. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.